It's the Wednesday Wisdom Show, and you need to know what happened to the future. There's only one force in reality, and this force is expressed with two sides as far as human experience goes. The single force is really the will to bestow. And all phenomena that we see, that we call force, energy, thrust, work, all of these things, they're all an expression of the will to bestow. It's those things that sustain what we call life. And what we call life is the second side of that force, the other side, which is a will to receive. And what can we receive but that which the force of bestowal wants to give? And because of that, everything that we experience altogether, and certainly everything that we desire and feel, long for, and then feel as pleasure, is nothing except a disguise of one sort or another, a dressing that we put on this pure will to bestow. And there's a plan behind this single force, which is to develop this other side of it, which it created out of itself, something out of nothing, that is, something out of absence. And this absence that we feel is the need, the hunger, and what we call desire, or the motivating force on which our reality dresses. What I mean is that no matter what it is that we long for, that we wish that we had, or that we see, or that we taste, all of that is only the force of bestowal. In other words, the force of bestowal is what we call the creator. And everything in our experience is made up of that force. It's either the pleasure we take in it, or the feeling of rejection that we get from a high intensity of it. We can only take so much, but everything that we do take, we usually take with pleasure. Now, the general plan of our existence is that the force of bestowal created us in order to raise us to a state in which we would consciously choose to have this same force, desire, or intention towards life as a whole. We would become similar, not that we become the creator, but that we would become similar in our inner tendency, in our intention towards whose development and whose pleasure we would figure as the meaning, purpose, and direction of our life. And the way that all of this system is arranged for us, all the reality that we see, comes from how we dress desire. So you can look at the force of evolution, both individual evolution and the evolution of, well, everything, but let's just look at the human species. From the beginning of its appearance as a desire to its ultimate end state. And we can also see where we are in that whole picture by what it is that we're chasing after. The beginning of this whole process is very raw. It's really fundamental. And the desires that we feel and the world that we see, the kind of primitive world that dresses in us according to these primal desires, these are pictures of the world that come from the desire for food, procreation, sex, family. These are the fundamental desires that have to do with what we think of as the definition of our existence. And if you look at, say, the arc of development of humanity, then you can see how, say, ancient man, cavemen, or even just beasts, just dinosaurs, and sort of primal life, cells, and all of that stuff, why they would have the form that they have. And that's because the way in which the creator or the force of bestowal is felt is according to the densest, most primitive level of needs and all of the satisfaction that is gotten from that. All right, so that's us way at the beginning. That's humanity at the beginning of our process. But also, if you want to look at your own life, you can see this happening also. Because at the beginning of your development as a child, everything is about receiving. And everything is about the simplest things and the absolute immediacy of having whatever desire we've got fulfilled. And all these desires are really quite simple. They have to do with affection. They have to do with food. They have to do with safety and being close to our parents. But there's always something stirring in us. Desire is not simple, and it's not meant to be a once and for all satisfaction. We can't get no satisfaction. The reason being that that's actually the true force of evolution. So the next thing that happens for us is that another greater desire, the seed of another desire, appears in us and pushes us towards a different kind of vision of reality based on this new desire. And this new desire is a desire for wealth. So wealth is just the accumulation of all of those things that are needed for survival. It's not as crude as the basic survival desire, although it incorporates it. It now starts to organize it and to sense it in all of its various colors and fineness. It's a refinement of this whole thing. And if you look at your development as an individual, you'll also see that you understand that you need to support yourself. This is the beginning of a kind of individuation in which you need to accumulate those things in order to sustain your life and start to build the kind of picture of the world or experience of the world that you want to have. So in terms of the development of humanity, you start to see villages and small organizations of culture, you could call it, families expanding into larger cooperative forms, and the beginnings of civilization. Why? Because desire, a force of how the Creator's force dresses inside the human ego and the human limitation, what it makes us move towards, and what kind of a world it makes us see. So we're starting to see a kind of a mutual world. First, we saw a world that was really on the level of animals. We have those basic desires in common with all animals, with all creatures. But wealth is already something that requires a kind of a mutuality, because you have to see the possessions of others. You have to feel yourself wealthy in relation to what's possessed by others. And this is what moves us forward. And we begin to see a world of creatures that communicate and trust or don't trust each other within the force of this desire. Now remember, I said, why don't we see a future? And we're going to get there. Just stick with me. Inside of wealth, and because desire can never really be satisfied, not the first one, not the one that we just spoke about, every time we fully experience or come to the end of that kind of development, the seed of another desire appears inside of us. And we're moved towards that. And the next desire is a desire for power. Now, power has all kinds of different forms, but let's look at it in terms of human societal development. It means the control over all wealth. It means that we want to develop systems that will use the first two desires that we had, and we will be able to make them be the way that we want them to be. In other words, this is a higher state of a kind of an independence in this desire, and we begin to now manage how wealth is going to be used, who will do what, when it will happen. We're becoming more and more like the force that manages us. I mean, at least we want to. Our limitation, though, of course, is that we are still working with the basic nature of the creature, which was created by the force of bestowal, and that creature is the desire to receive. We're still only working with that, so we're not actually directing anything. We're still completely under the control of this giving force, because all mechanisms within us are they're run by a software which is really self-satisfaction, and that is the opposite of the force of the Creator. Even power itself is not enough, not for humanity, and not for the individual. That power and influence really in the individual has got to do with, well, all kinds of things. I mean, it can be, controlling a business. It can be in politics. It can be in the form of art. It doesn't matter what it is. It's a kind of a using a sort of force of the, let's call it the intellect and cunningness and animal cunningness, which has got to do with understanding human nature, the limitations of human nature, and how people will always go for their self-interest, manipulating that in such a way that we control a social situation that we're in. Now, it is a highly developed social desire, and that's why we start to see complex organizations. We start to see civilization in the larger frame of things, and in the individual, we see people who are rising to CEOs, presidents, monarchs, all of these kinds of things that the individual aspires to. Ultimately, that's empty as well. But notice this, that each time that something, that a desire becomes filled and our reality seems to change before our eyes, the light of the will to bestow dresses in a completely different form. We still feel ourselves as developing, and we not only do we have the desire for that next thing, we have the pleasure of this development. And this pleasure is a good thing, and it's kind of the fuel behind the evolutionary force. We're being evolved in this whole process, not towards complete dominance within the realm of the creature or the will to receive. We are being developed in order to come into equivalence of form with the force that created us. That means that we would, as I said, we would have the same intention and be able to do the same things for the same reasons as the force that has created us, is developing us, is maintaining us, and is bringing us to completion, to fulfillment. Now, even the force of the desire of power eventually feels like nothing. Is that all there is? And another seed is there of something greater than that incorporates all of those other things, but is much greater than that, and that is the desire for knowledge. Why knowledge? Because knowledge represents the ability to direct everything, all of those simpler desires and all of the fulfillment that comes with it, and to build something new. It's like the peak of human imagination, actually. It's like the limit of our reason. It's about as far as we can see. This is a desire for being masterful in science, being a leader in religion, because religion has to do with knowledge. It has to do with the highest, most evolved arts. It has to do with healing, medicine, and all of these things of science. And you can see that as an individual, we think of these things as vocations, avocations, and a person who is turned on by knowledge will, want to teach or want to do all of these things that I've mentioned. But like every other desire, once we taste it, the desire is put out, and the seed of a new desire appears there. Now, the new desire that appears once knowledge feels empty and tasteless, and by the way, the world that we see as a result of knowledge is the one that we're in now, this stage of humanity that we're in now, in which we are connected instantaneously with our phones, and we go into space, and we can create all kinds of things that allow us to move just by desiring to be in a certain place. All of these things are just prosthesis. They're crutches. They're indicating something else that we truly want, but they don't get us there. And when this one becomes empty, this one is really bitter, because we've come to the limits of our imagination. And the desire, the aching that we feel, the longing that we feel, is for something that does not exist at all within human nature. We've reached the absolute barrier of the will to receive. And we start longing for something that doesn't exist on the plane of reception. And the plane of reception, that border between the physical desires that satisfy the ego and the ones that are like the Creator, is the border between this world, the physical world, and the spiritual world. And we start longing for something, but we haven't got any idea what it is. We don't really have any concrete example in our own nature. We don't have a form for it. All we have is a kind of a longing. And because we can't picture what that is above this world or beyond the horizon of the will to receive, we think there's nothing there. It's as though there's nothing there. This is the stage that we are at precisely right now. Because our whole sensation of time has got to do with the expectation behind desire, the sensation of being fulfilled, and then the aftertaste of being filled. And all of those things that we experienced up until this point, all those human desires, the desire for just the animal level of stuff, things for survival, wealth, power, and knowledge, that's not at all what we were tasting. All along, what we were tasting and the reality that was built out of that according to our limitations, that was all the Creator. It's just how the Creator appears to us, how it feels to us, what we dress it in, how we blind ourselves to its true nature. So here there's nothing at this point. When this next spiritual desire appears in us, we're blind. And the future has always been the desire for something that we have a sense of. We could reckon what that next desire was. We could kind of feel it in ourselves because it evolved and encompassed the ones before it. But here, it's not like the ones that we had. Time doesn't actually exist. It's a quality that surrounds a particular desire, how it develops, and how we taste it. The present is when that desire enters into us and we feel that meeting point and satisfaction. We call that present time. And the past is the memory of some sort of filling, but not a filling that would satisfy us now. That's how time is constructed within the system of desire, which is the system of evolution. Time doesn't exist, only the evolution of desire. And now we're facing a desire that we cannot reckon. There's a seed inside of us, a point in the heart, which is a spark from the complete opposite kind of desire, which is a desire to bestow. So to us, we don't feel any future as a result of that, but it's there. And all the phenomena that we see now where our institutions aren't working, where no one can come up with solutions to anything, because we can't reliably base anything on the desires that have passed, and we don't even want to. Nobody even wants to get into dialogue about any of those things, and we can't agree on them. Because in us, we all feel a tremendous desire, not for what has been, actually, but for being able to live together in a different, higher, and opposite state. But we don't have any sense of that, because this next stage in our development, the acquisition of the spiritual desire, means that we have to function above our nature and use all of those desires no longer to receive, but use all of our desires in order to give, and to give to the whole system. It's not hitting us consciously. That's what's happening under the surface. That's what's building the experience that we're having now in the kind of chaotic world and what seems, violent, angry. It's this desire for something that we cannot depict to ourselves, but it's there. And that's why we're feeling the way that we're feeling. Now what we need to do is to understand that we're all experiencing that, and we have to learn how to function above our egoistic nature. And that is something that has to be learned, because it's not in our nature. And if you want to learn it, you can.